Hello and welcome back to episode 5 of Highway to PowerShell, a series where we cover a few minutes of PowerShell in each episode. In episode 2, we talked about how PowerShell outputs objects instead of text. This means that we usually don't need to work with text output in PowerShell, but sometimes there is still a need for working with text. When coding, a piece of text is often called a string, and PowerShell is no exception. An object that contains a piece of text has the type system.string and is simply called a string. There are a few different techniques to creating a string, and in this episode, we'll be looking at the two most common ones. We'll also have a look at how we can combine strings, and last but not least, we'll have a look at some formatting techniques. Make sure to stay all the way to the end because I got a few tricks I want to show you. Let's dive into the terminal. The easiest way to create a string is by simply putting some text between two single quotes. This is called a verbatim string, and I think it's easiest because it creates a string just like we typed it without any logic or magic. I can, for example, create a string that say, "That will be $4, please." The string will be exactly like I would expect it to, $ and all. Even though this is my favorite way of creating a string, I think the next one is actually the most common. This time, we're going to use double quotes instead of single quotes. This is called an expandable string. Expandable because any variable written to the string will be expanded to its value. Look at this example. This time, I use a single quoted string containing the price, $4, and then I create another string using double quotes and just type $price into it. Here we can see that the variable price gets expanded to its value. This is a great way to combine strings. When using double quotes, there are also a set of special characters or escape sequences that we can use. They are all prefixed by the escape character in PowerShell, which is backtick. Whenever we type a backtick, we tell PowerShell to interpret the following sequence as something with a special meaning. I mainly use the sequences backtick n for new line, backtick t for tab, and in PowerShell 6 or above, there is also a Unicode escape sequence of backtick u that we can use to type any Unicode characters, like smileys. Here is an example of a string using all three of them. The first sequence of backtick n over here will create a new line. The second sequence of backtick t will create a tab to indent the new line. And then I use backtick u followed by the sequence to insert a Unicode smiley or emoji for a factory. And if I run this, you see that I get an output, a string with 4 lines, each line with a emoji as a kind of bullet point. To find all escape sequences, simply run help about special characters, or use the link in the description below. Now let me clear the screen. There are two things I see people struggle with when it comes to expanding strings. The first thing I see people struggle with is to get the property of a variable. Let's say I want to output my PowerShell version in a string. I've often seen code like this. So it makes sense to just type $psVersionTable.psVersion to get the PS version. The problem with this is that PowerShell interprets this as saying insert the value of PS version table followed by period and PS version. And as you can see in the string here, PowerShell doesn't know how to output the PS version table as a string, so it will simply use the type name of system.management.automation.psVersion#table. And once it's outputted the type name, it will just add the PS version, just like in our string here. To solve this, we need to use something called a sub-expression. And a sub-expression is simply a dollar followed by a parenthesis. So if I do dollar parenthesis and inside of the parenthesis do $psVersionTable.psVersion, this will create a sub-expression like a small script. The script will be executed and whatever is output by the script will be put into my string. Now you can see it works as I expected it. Remember that you can run any code inside a sub-expression. Sub-expressions can be used to add any type of dynamic context to a string, but it can get really hard to read, so be careful. The next thing that might be a struggle is when we want to use a special character like $signs or double quotes inside a string without PowerShell interpreting it. The solution to this is to use a backtick to escape the special character. Imagine we want to output a diagnostic message with the value of a special variable, in this case $price. To get an actual $sign and quotes inside a string, we can use backtick to escape them, like this. So here we use a backtick dollar to type an actual dollar inside the string. Here we use a backtick double quote to type an actual double quote inside a string. Here we use $price just to expand the $price variable. We get another actual double quote, and then we have a double quote that just ends the string. Of course, using single quotes would solve the problem with special characters like $signs, but then we can't insert variables. Or can we? Let me introduce you to the format operator of -f. If we want to get the best of two worlds, using verbatim single quoted strings and be able to insert variable values, we can use the format operator. We use it by inserting placeholders into our string. Here's a simple example. First, we have a variable price that contains the price, just like before. Then we type our string that we want to output. The difference this time is that we'll use a single quote, and instead of typing $price inside a string, we'll type a placeholder. In this case, the number 0 enclosed in curly braces. Right here. After the string, we add the format operator -f, followed by the value that we want to input, which is $price. 0 in this case is an index and simply refers to the first value given after the format operator -f. So far, this might not look super compelling, but there are a few cool tricks that we can do with the format operator. Let's try a little different example. This time, I use a placeholder that is 0:C instead of just 0, and then I just add the value 4 in the end instead of a string containing $4. We got the number 4 formatted as currency in my current culture. Let's try listing a few items and their prices, like this. As you can see, we get them all nicely rounded and formatted with 2 decimals and a $sign, but I think the output could be a little bit nicer. I would like the prices to be right aligned instead of left aligned, so all decimals are above each other. To solve this, we can add a comma and the number 7 after the index. This tells PowerShell to always use at least 7 characters for our value and align it to the right. Using a negative number will make it align it to the left. Now the output looks a lot better. The placeholder can consist of 1, 2, or 3 components. The one we always need to add is the index. In our example, this is always 0, since we only have one value after -f. After the index, we can add 2 more components, both fully optional. We can add a comma followed by a minimum length, and we can add a colon followed by a format string. In the example, we use the capital C as a format string. Capital C means currency in this case, but there are a lot of other format strings. There are, for example, standard format strings for numbers, covering decimal, exponential, fixed point, numerical, and hexadecimal formats. There are also a long list of standards for dates, and you can write custom format strings. You can read more about them all by following the link in the description below. Using the format operator can seem a bit complicated at first, but sometimes it comes in really handy, so it's well worth the effort to learn it. It is important to remember that regardless of which technique we use to create a string, they all result in the same type of string. It is only the way we create them that differs. Before we summarize, if you found this episode helpful, Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, where we'll cover how to modify strings. I would really appreciate if you hit that like button to show me that you want more videos like this. To summarize, we covered 2 ways to create strings, using single quotes or double quotes. Single quoted strings are called verbatim strings and let you use any type of special characters inside a string. Double quoted strings are called expandable strings since they expand variables. Here we can insert variables and special characters like tabs and new lines. To insert a property of a variable, we need to surround it with a dollar and parentheses to create a sub-expression. We can use the format operator -f to insert formatted text into a string. This works for both verbatim and expandable strings. So, when should we use which technique? I try to use verbatim strings as a default choice and only use expandable strings when I need a variable to be expanded. Since both ways results in the same type of string in the end anyway, I guess it really doesn't matter too much which one you use. Do whatever you feel that you are most comfortable with. As long as the code does what it's intended to do, it works, right? And that's it for this episode. I hope I'll see you in the next. And until then, keep automating.